everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Dayspring Discussions. I'm your host, Sean McGahee. In this show, we talk about movies, TV, sci-fi, fantasy, comic books. If you geek out about it, we're going to talk about it. You can listen to Dayspring Discussions on iTunes, YouTube, Podomatic, and Patreon, and contact Dayspring Discussions on the Facebook group, Twitter account, and dayspringdiscussions@gmail.com. Well, happy Tuesday, everyone. Hope you all are enjoying your week. Guys, we've got something a little special planned for today. So normally I would sit here and talk to you about recent news that came out in the world of geekdom, but I got a little something special planned. As I promised, we got 10 weeks till the Rise of Skywalker is about to come out. So I plan on rewatching it, and I watched episode 1 along with my wife Lisa. So I want to sit back and talk about episode 1. Every week we're going to come on here and talk about the Star Wars saga. But of course, I cannot do that without my own personal handmaiden, Miss Lisa Locke McGahee. Say hello, Lisa.
Hi.
All right, guys. So basically that's what we're going to do. Each week we're going to come in here. We're going to have watched a Star Wars film. We're going in chronological order, and we're going to talk about the movie. Now, some of them have come out, a while ago, so there are new things that have come to light, basically, of how we feel about them, changes that we might feel that weren't originally when the movie came out. So, it gives us new perspective on the film, so to speak. So, we're going to do that, of course, and you guys fire back. And we're also going to talk to you about some books and comics surrounding the film as well. So if you guys haven't read any of those, we might give some recommendations as far as that goes. So, but overall, I think we're about ready to go. Lisa, you ready to dive in here?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, guys. So let's go right into it. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, came out in 1999, directed by George Lucas, written by George Lucas, and it was the return of everything that we loved for some of us, because before this we just had the original trilogy, couple of books and comics, but it was coming back. George Lucas was coming back to tell more of his story, telling the backstory of how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. I was so excited. I remember watching the trailer for the first time at home, and it took me like 2 hours to download the trailer because it was dial-up modem, and it took forever to do it. So I would watch a little of it, and then I'd pause it for a half hour. Come back, watch maybe another 30 seconds, and then I'd have to come back later. It just took a while to do it. But Lisa, what are your memories of before Episode 1? I know, you haven't been a big Star Wars fan as long as I have.
Right. So
what do you remember about the lead up to Episode 1?
I mean, I vaguely remember it at all. This was when I was in college. So, I had 8 million other things on my mind, and I didn't grow up
Loving
engulfed in Star Wars like you did. I remember watching the original trilogy with my parents, but I didn't love it. I never did. I pretended I was Princess Leia. It wasn't my thing when I was a kid. And so when these came out, I don't even think I saw the prequel movies in the theater.
What?
I'm pretty sure I didn't.
How have we gone 10 years of marriage and you're just revealing this to me?
I'm sure that I didn't.
I remember when I met you, you had them on video, I know.
Yeah, I ended up getting into Star Wars later after college. But when I was in college, you know the kind of student I was when I was in school. When I was in college, I was a very dedicated college student. I did not, I didn't have, anyway, we're not talking about my college life, but... In 1999, I was in college. And it came out, May of 99?
May of 99,
Yeah,
yes.
That was my freshman year in college.
May 19th, 1999.
Yeah, that was my freshman year in college. I did not go see these movies in the theater.
I remember I begged my parents to let me go to the midnight opening, and they wouldn't. Episode 1 and Episode 2, I begged them to let me go to the midnight showing, but it was a school night, so they weren't going to let me do it.
Right.
It wasn't until Episode 3, when I was, well into college, and I could do what I wanted, that I finally went and saw a midnight showing.
Yeah. I might have gone to see Episode 3 in the theater, because by then... I was not in college anymore. But I know that I did not see The Phantom Menace in theaters.
It was a school day. I remember I wore a little bucket hat that had Episode 1 on it. I pre-ordered it from
a bucket hat?
Yeah,
what the heck is that?
Huh?
What's a bucket hat?
Like a bucket hat. Like a fishing hat,
I have no idea.
Yeah, it goes all the way around like a fishing hat, it looks like, it said Episode 1 on it. I ordered it through my Lucasfilm magazine they had. Yeah, because I was a member of the Lucasfilm fan club. So, yeah, whatever. You were studying, so shut up, okay? But yeah, so I had my episode 1 hat that I wore to school that day, and I was excited. So me and Dad went right after school, and I went and saw it. I liked it. And I went and saw I think 3 more times in theaters after that. But overall, I liked it at the time. But as you grow older, you realize maybe it wasn't as good as you thought. So we just rewatched the film for the umpteenth time. But it's been 20 years, and I think it's definitely easy to say it's probably most everyone's least favorite of the films. Honestly, I've said this before. I would watch the Clone Wars movie over this as well, even though most people put the Clone Wars movie at their very bottom of Star Wars films. I'd put this.
This is my very bottom.
Yeah, this is my very bottom as well too. So, even as we were watching it through the day, we were watching it very casually, and we were kind of making fun of some stuff as well. So before we go and rag on it, what do you think, as of right now, what are some good things you like about the film?
I mean, I think the best thing for me about the film is that it brings in Qui-Gon. Like, you get your introduction. Well, it's the only time you get Qui-Gon.
Yes.
But, I mean, I think that's one thing I like about it. I like the Obi-Wan Qui-Gon, their relationship, and seeing that, that. Because, especially when you got this movie, all you had before it, I mean, besides, like, the books and stuff.
You had the original trilogy.
Based on just the original trilogy, you didn't really get a whole lot of the Jedi.
Exactly.
Like you did. This was our first taste of what the Jedis were like in the movies.
Yeah, I remember George Lucas saying that. It was like, this is like the golden age of the Jedi. These are fully trained Jedi, because in the trilogy we had Old Man Kenobi. Right. We had half machine Darth Vader.
Yeah, and then Luke, who wasn't
fully trained.
Yeah, he was just figuring it out.
So these are full potential Jedi.
Right, and not just. This actually gives you your first taste of how, like, the Jedi, and I'm doing air quotes here, like, as an organization work.
Yeah.
You get your introduction to really, they talk about there's always a master and apprentice with the dark side. Like, you really kind of find out about Jedi and Sith. And so, I mean, I think I like that about it, and that it's the introduction to things that end up being my favorite things about the Star Wars universe. Yeah. Like, I know a lot of people like moving away from the Jedi. Like, why does everything have to be so Jedi-centric? But that's what I love about Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if it isn't about the Jedi, then it's just about any other, whatever, like, any other space.
Yeah, it could be Star Trek for all we know.
It could be anything, right. The Jedi, to me, is what makes Star Wars. That's what makes it Star Wars.
Well, it's like, I always like to quote, what's her name from Episode 7? Maz. She's like, it's about the battle. The only battle that matters between the light side and the dark side. I mean, all these, like, intergalactic civil wars and these people, like, no, it's about the dark side versus the light side. It's about the Force, okay?
Yeah. I mean, there are bits and pieces of the other I mean, I like learning about the planets and the people and the different... But the bit of Star Wars that I think makes it unique is the Force. Yeah. It's the Jedi and the Sith.
I've always thought that, too. And, I always thought, without the Jedi, I'm like, I'm not, like, big on, like, The Mandalorian coming out. Like, obviously, I'm excited for it. But it's like, I know I'm not going to really see any Jedi or anything like that, so I'm not too excited about it.
I'm more excited about it for the fact that it's, oh my gosh, I'm having a complete brain fart on his name. No, the Jon Favreau.
Jon Favreau
and
Dave
having
Filoni
involved.
Yes.
I'm more excited about it from that perspective as opposed to the fact that it's about the Mandalorian. Like, meh. I mean, Boba Fett's my, like, least favorite bit of. But, I mean,
but I like.
I know it's not about Boba Fett.
It's about
an
actual Mandalorian, though.
Right.
Which
not
Mandalorians are awesome. Boba Fett sucks.
Right. Boba Fett does suck.
Exactly. But again, I say I'm not big on anything that's not Jedi related.
Yeah.
But I really liked Rogue One, and I really liked Solo, which had nothing Jedi related except for Rogue One had Darth Vader in it.
Right.
So I'm open to the idea.
Right.
But anyway, I could say okay. So what else would you say you liked about Episode 1?
I mean, I don't know. I like that. I like overall that it's the introduction that you get where the story comes from.
Every saga has the beginning.
Yeah, it's the beginning. It's just like with I like that it's the beginning. I mean, there's far more I dislike about it than that I like about it. But I like that it's the beginning of the story. You get you find out where Anakin came from. You meet Padme. You see, you meet Obi-Wan. You get kind of the beginning of the backstory of where Palpatine came from. Like, you get to see some cool new worlds. I mean, Naboo is beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you don't really get that much of Naboo in this one. You get more of that, in the next one.
If I go to any planet, I go to Naboo.
Yeah, I mean, Naboo's gorgeous. And, I mean, I like that this one really starts, like, the world building in terms. Because, in the prequel, I mean, the original trilogy, you go to a few places. I mean, Tatooine, but you don't really. The original trilogy isn't really about world building. It's about Luke. It's not about creating this, but this is, I think, where they really kind of started
giving it depth,
world building, like you learning about all the different places and people, and I like that about it.
Yeah. All right. So when I was sitting there watching it, I just finished Kim Nabsop's book. Reasons Why We Love Star Wars, and he goes through like his top 100 reasons and stuff like that. So I was thinking of like the things, like scenes in my head of what I like, and there's two that come to mind when it comes to this movie. And obviously the number one is at the end, Darth Maul, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, Duel of the Fates. I remember back when the film came out, you had TRL with Carson Daly, and it was like number one. And I voted it several times to be number one on TRL, just so I could watch it. I recorded it, I think, at one point too. So, just the Duel of Fates, that whole thing was awesome. Of course, Darth Maul, awesome character. We'll talk about more of him in a minute. But then my other thing or scene that I really loved was going back to what we're talking about, where you actually get to see the Jedi, is the very first scene where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are, on the blockade ship, and they're doing their Jedi thing. You're seeing the Jedi in action doing what they do, so to speak. And I just, like I told you when we were watching, I was like, if I could just skip the hour there on Tatooine and just give me like the first half hour and the last half hour to 45 minutes, I'd enjoy the film a lot more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, especially like all the interactions between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, where he's like teaching him things, and just in passing, where it's not like, where he just like is saying, giving him little bits of wisdom here and there, like, you really see, which they really show you a lot more of that, obviously, like once you get into the Clone Wars, you see that with Anakin and Ahsoka. So like you get so much more of how the Jedi teach the younglings,
the relationships
work. Right? Like, so I mean, I really like that.
I really like too that this is the beginning that you get to see the Obi-Wan snark. He's like, "You're right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short."
Yeah,
that Obi-Wan snark that goes throughout, throughout the whole prequels and the Clone Wars, and
just Obi-Wan.
That's why I love Obi-Wan as a character. Yeah, the snark with that. Okay, so. Much like we usually do with, regular movie reviews, I got IMDb pulled up. We got the list of actors. So let's just kind of break down some characters. You talked about it first. Liam Neeson, Qui-Gon Jinn. I mean, the thing I hate is you don't get more of him. He's at this point he was, probably the biggest actor in the film. And he pretty much is the lead in the film, and he dies at the end. We understand that because no one had ever heard of Qui-Gon. He didn't make it to the original trilogy, so somewhere along the way he was going to bite it. And of course, weeks before the movie came out, the soundtrack spoiled it. Because on the soundtrack it said Qui-Gon's noble end, so that was going to happen. But overall, I like the character, and I want more explored. Like, before the Claudia Gray novel Master and Apprentice came out, I said I want more of Ben and Luke post Return of the Jedi or before The Force Awakens, and I want more of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon before the Phantom Menace. And the book kind of brought that out a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about Master and Apprentice. For those you don't know, it's a book came out several months ago now at least.
I mean it came out right around Celebration. So that was April.
It was just April. And it takes place before episode 1. It's pretty much in the new canon since Disney took over. It's probably the oldest thing we've gotten in canon because it goes this and then episode 1 and then everything else. So it's kind of the oldest thing as far as canon wise, unless you count parts of the Dooku Lost book audio drama, because that goes before too when Qui-Gon was his apprentice as well.
That does play a little bit into that.
Bits into that too. But yeah, with that book, I know I enjoyed it because again it was Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and Claudia Gray of course always writes a good book.
Oh yeah.
With that, and you got this is 7 years before.
I'm not sure timeline.
Something like that.
I thought you were going to pull up the timeline here. So
I do have the timeline here. Let me pull it up. The books. Here we go. So let's see where we're at. Here we go. Going down here. Master and Apprentice it's 39 years before the Battle of Yavin, which I guess if you want to do the math, Let's see here. Dang, I'm gonna do the math.
I thought there was like physically a timeline that they had made.
Physically a timeline. Anyway, but there, let's do the math. Let's see, 2013, 10, 13. So we're talking, about 6 years before.
Okay.
6 years before the Phantom Menace is really what it is. But that's a good book. If you guys haven't checked that out, you like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, that's a good one to check out. So I would recommend. You recommend that?
Yeah, no, I really liked Master and Apprentice. I mean, I didn't love it. It's not my favorite Claudia Gray. I thought I was going to like it more based on the hype that people were, especially at Celebration, people who had already read it, who were like raving about it. I did like it a lot, but like I said, it's not my favorite of the Claudia Grays. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it definitely does a lot, I think, in that it definitely builds. You learn so much about Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and it kind of paints their relationship. It's unexpected, their relationship. You know, it kind of goes back to the early parts of when, you know, Qui-Gon started training Obi-Wan and that they had a hard time, you know. But also one of the things I really like about it is it brings in that other Jedi who's kind of a rogue and kind of disenfranchised. Tough, he kind of has some sketchy things in his... I like that it shows you the Jedi are not infallible.
I pictured him more of as like a Sam Elliott type of guy.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. But not even with him. I mean, it shows a lot of the Jedi, and it just shows how the Jedi code was so constricting, and that it did kind of force the Jedi to do some things maybe that weren't necessarily... to make some bad decisions because the code was so... constricting. Like it was so limiting in what they could do. So I mean, it really shows you how the Jedi, my words are not coming today. It just shows you how it was difficult. It wasn't as easy as it made it think to be a Jedi. It wasn't just like you became a Jedi and everything was like sunshine and roses.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it really shows you the
kind of discipline you have to have.
Well, and not even the discipline, but kind of how some of the... I mean, yes, discipline. Yes, there's definitely discipline. But it also just shows you how some of the things that the Jedi had that you had to do because you were a Jedi maybe were unnecessary or maybe caused more problems than they were necessary, you know, where it kind of helps you understand better why Dooku didn't want to be it. Like
exactly.
So it laid the foundation for...
Yeah.
Because, you know, in this kind of leads into... I know we haven't gotten to, you know, Attack of the Clones yet, but, I mean... this book kind of gives you the beginnings of understanding why Dooku left the Order and why ever Jedis left the Order, because being in the Jedi Order there was a lot of rules. Yeah. And it was sometimes, I think this book really made you understand that sometimes it was hard for Jedis to understand what the reasons were for those rules. Yeah. Like why, which kind of plays into the whole Anakin and, you know, like... So, I mean, I think that it's definitely worth a read. It's a good book. I mean, it fits in really well in this with, you know. Yeah.
With that, Okay, so Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obviously, I mean, I think a lot of people say it's the best part of the whole prequel trilogy. If there is good parts of the prequel trilogy, Obi-Wan, played by Ewan McGregor, is at the top of it. And, of course, I'm so glad he's coming back to get his series on Disney+. Kind of almost redemptive in a little way. We introduced him in this one as a young Padawan. It's a little different, of course, because we're used to seeing him Alec Guinness and more seasoned and stuff like that. I have more to say on that, you know, throughout the whole prequel trilogy, so I'll save that probably till we get to episode 3. Okay, Natalie Portman as Queen Amidala, 14-year-old queen of a planet. I don't know why we wrap ourselves around that. Can you explain that one to me a little bit? Having, you know...
I mean, they explain that in some of the books. I mean, that's how the Naboo are. Their queens were always very young.
Why was there reasoning because of that?
Oh, I mean, I don't know that they ever give a reason. That's just what they do. That's just how the planet does it. And they're not really... It's not queen like a monarchy. They're elected officials. Mm-hmm. I mean, and they start the kids in program... I mean, there's definitely... In the Padme book, the Queen's Shadow, which I think fits... somewhere.
Yeah, it's a couple years after. And hold on, I'll bring up the books. Queen's Shadow is 28 years. Because
that one is. I mean, it's hard to tell where it really fits in because
you're probably going about 5 years after, if not maybe a little.
It's between Phantom Menace. It's between episodes 1 and 2.
It's basically a couple years after
because it's after she's queen, but it talks about her becoming a senator.
Yeah.
So, but they talk a lot about. I mean, that book is very political. It talks a lot about the politics on Naboo, the whole situation with how the queens are elected, how the kids get into politics, how she got in moved from being a queen into being a senator, how she got started in the Senate. It goes into a lot, which I mean, with her handmaidens.
Yeah,
and,
like handmaidens.
I mean, because they introduced the handmaidens in this one, but you're not really sure. I mean, the movies don't do the handmaidens justice. Like, when you read that book, like, you really discover those handmaidens are, like, they're hardcore. Like, I mean, they're impressive, and you learn a lot about the handmaidens in there. You learn a lot about, just what...
Their loyalty to her, too.
Because the movie, and I mean, one of my biggest, I know I've talked about this many, many times in the prequels, is how Padme is portrayed in the movies. And this one starts right off with it. She's this queen, but she does, I like how at the battle, like in Naboo, how they really let her she came up with the plan, she made it work, she did the negotiations, it was her idea, it was her execution. Like, they really show that even though she was basically a kid, she knew what she was doing.
She's still a leader,
She was definitely a leader, and she was doing what was best for her people, and she never faltered in that and whatever. And I think they did a good job with that. But, throughout the prequel trilogy, they just...
We can get into more of that later. The only thing, like, watching the film again is, okay, Natalie Portman was a very young actress when she was cast. I think she was one of the first people cast for the film, too, because I know she read with Jake Lloyd for Anakin and all the other kids as well. She seems so wooden. Like, the potential she can be. And again,
that's what George Lucas wanted her to do. She had acted.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, in this film, I keep telling people, in this trilogy, or even in this film alone, you have Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, some great thespians, and everyone just seems so very wooden, minus, Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor. I see trying to do their best, and they're the best part of the film, too, and... it just seems, it comes off, again, like you said, it's what George Lucas was telling you.
Yeah, because, obviously, you watch anything that Natalie Portman was in before or after this, and she's an amazing actress. But she was very stiff. Her interactions with, especially when she was interacting with Anakin in this movie, everything she says, it was so, like, I don't really understand this place. Like, it's just like a droid. It's very hollow and
we can go into more about that, in the later parts, and with Hayden Christensen and, how he was told to act.
Yeah, her chemistry with him at least was better. Yeah.
But he was Jake Lloyd was a little kid.
Yeah, but I'm not talking like sexual chemistry. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying, even like, just when they, like, I thought he was very real. Yeah. The way that he acted, I thought was great. He was very realistic. He acted exactly like a little boy in that situation would be acting.
Annoying as hell.
Exactly.
Annoying as hell.
Well, no, I don't think he was annoying as hell. I thought he was charming.
Okay, so let's jump over to Jake Lloyd. Obviously he's gone through some rough stuff since then, and anyone who bullied him because of it, you should be ashamed of yourself. But okay, 1999, you had this film come out, and then you also had another film, The Mummy Returns, Brendan Fraser, that had a little kid around the same age, and the whole time I'm thinking, God, I wish Anakin was like the kid from The Mummy Returns, because he was that same age, but he was so much cooler. He didn't seem as naive, I guess.
But that's what he's supposed to be.
As a kid who's a slave?
Yeah, that's where... See, I 100% disagree with you.
Totally.
I thought that Jake Lloyd as Anakin in this one, I thought he was great. I thought he acted exactly like a little kid that was born into slavery that was always trying to find hope. A hopeful kid. He didn't let the slavery get him down. He was always looking for a way out. He stayed positive. I thought he was charming. I thought he was sweet. I thought he did exactly... And from what we later know about Anakin, like I've said many, many times, Anakin is a whiny bitch. So I thought he fit right in. He is. It's just like when Luke is all like, not fair. Like, that's just how the Skywalker men seem to be. So I thought that Jake was adorable. I thought he was cute and charming and did exactly... He acted just like a kid should, I thought he was fine.
Fair enough.
100% disagree with you.
Let's just jump over that then, okay? Senator Palpatine, played by the late Ian McDermott. Or not late.
The late? I was like, he's not dead
yet. But he was... Because I guess... again, when I was listening to Kim Knapsack's book, he was in his 30s when he played the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, so he was still in good health and still young enough. He'd come back and play Palpatine for the prequels, too, which I thought was kind of cool. And, of course, he was the Phantom Menace throughout the film. That's what, they're alluding to in the title, of course. But it's one of those things, too, where it's like, we as the audience know he's going to become the Emperor, he's going to be the villain, But, it's like, I wonder, anyone who saw him in the cloak as Darth Sidious, like, did anybody not know?
I did not know.
Really?
I 100% remember. The first time I saw this movie, I actually remember now. We were talking about how I didn't see it in the theater. I remember now watching it in my apartment when it came out on video. Me and my roommates. I remember we watched it in our apartment. And I remember when it was at the end of it, one of my friends said something about him being
the
emperor, and I was like, what? Like, I had no idea.
Wow. Okay. See, that's just, I mean, again, I was a big Star Wars fan, so I knew that was
I had no idea.
So I totally get, okay. Well,
because I remember when she said that, I was like, are you sure? And then I was like, oh, and then we watched it again, and I was like, oh, no, you're right.
I could see the chin.
I see it now.
Yes, there you go. Okay. We'll see different perspectives. So, people who aren't as well versed in Star Wars as I was, they bought it. So I guess I'll give them credit for that. Shmi Skywalker. Okay. Let's talk about this prophecy here.
That's another thing, that the Master and Apprentice, that's another reason to read that book. That book goes they talk way deep about all these prophecies, where the prophecies came from, whether or not the Jedi believe in them. They talk about Qui-Gon's obsession, semi-obsession with the prophecies, and Dooku's. Anyway, that's another bit.
Okay, yeah.
Another reason to read that book.
I honestly, you could do some kind of chosen one thing, that's fine, but to make Anakin basically Jesus, I'm like, it was iffy, and that I didn't get it. Of course, when I was younger and I first watched the film, I didn't get it. But then, several years later, and I'm like, so they made Anakin Jesus, okay?
Basically,
he's Jedi Jesus, so to speak, But then it goes into one of those things too, where from that perspective, of course, then the bloodline of Jesus Christ would be very important and very powerful, I guess you could say, which is why the descendants of Anakin Skywalker, whether it was Luke or Ben or Leia or whoever, had the power flowing through them, allegedly, so to speak. Yes. So, but Shmi Skywalker, she didn't get a lot of screen time in this, but she did what she had to do to send her little boy on his way. I want to jump down to Jar Jar Binks.
Oh,
Ahmed Best.
Can we just skip Jar Jar?
Okay. Well, obviously. I don't know who I found more annoying, Anakin or Jar Jar.
Jar Jar is so much more annoying. Oh my gosh. Like, on so many levels, Jar Jar is more annoying.
Again, but Ahmed Best did what he was told to do.
See, here's the difference in those two characters. Jar Jar is not necessary to the story.
Okay.
You could take Jar Jar out, and it would be totally fine.
But then how? Okay, so how?
I'm not saying they could have easily found another way to meet the Gungans. The Gungans themselves were annoying as shit. You could have found. I know, like music, just the way they talk. Everything about the Gungans annoyed me. And, like, it's just one of those things where I feel like you could just have... You can't take out Anakin. He obviously is necessary to the story.
But I wish... going back to that, I wish, back in the book, how Star Wars conquered the galaxy or universe or whatever it was by Chris Taylor. And originally, Lucas was going to start Anakin out older. Almost like a teenager, And and everyone told him, yeah, that's a great idea. And then when he went back and said, no, I'm going to make him younger. And everyone's like, no, don't do that.
Well, but the thing is, you kind of have to. Once you... like with Jedi. It was... It's like, especially if he knew with what he was going to do with the Jedi, taking them away from their families, that's why they take them as babies to the temple. You can take a kid away from their family as a baby and they don't know any different. You take a kid away when they're, 5, 6, 7 years old, that's hard. Take a kid away when they're like in their, teens, like... They already know their life.
Attachment.
They already have their life.
And that's why, the other Jedi didn't want him to be trained. Because
right.
He was
Making him older would have been even worse for...
Yeah. Well, again, go back to Empire. Yoda was like, oh, he is too old to begin the training, as his excuse as why he didn't want to train Luke. When really, we all know that Yoda's excuse was that he wanted Leia instead of Luke. Jar Jar, I think, is more annoying.
God, Jar Jar's so annoying.
Okay. We'll give you that, okay? Anthony Daniels is C-3PO. He really wasn't in...
he was just starting out.
What did you think about, Anakin being the one who made C-3PO?
I think it was an odd choice.
I think it's trying to like, hey, let's tie everything we can together as much as we can. Let's get as many familiar characters in there as we can.
Right.
It was just like...
Well, and we were talking recently about how I think that was one of the biggest things that they missed out on in the prequels was that Star Wars is doing a great job with now is making some really awesome new droids. It's like the first 6 movies... that's all you get.
C-3PO and R2.
Yeah, that's all you get. Mm-hmm. And it's like now there's so many really awesome droids that have been... I mean, in some of the more recent films, some of the droids are my favorite characters. Yeah. I mean, I love Chopper. I love L3. I mean, K2SO is amazing. Yeah, like, I think that's one of the things they really missed out on in the prequels is instead of focusing everything so much on R2-D2 and 3PO, is they should have brought in some new stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. Well, then, of course, we had R2. Kenny Baker was back for that, too. And R2...
Is R2.
Is R2.
Is R2.
He can't not... I mean, he's the hero of the entire saga. I mean, he's R2. He saves the day from the very beginning. The very beginning, they're trying to get out of the blockade run. What happens? R2-D2 has to save them. They would be nowhere without R2-D2.
True story.
I mean, they never gotten off of Naboo. Anakin would never be found. Nope. So R2-D2 starting it all off. I guess we could blame him then too for all that if you want to go that way with it. But yes, and then of course Frank Oz was back as Yoda. Now in of course the original Phantom Menace, he was still a puppet. When they redid it for the Blu-rays, he was CGI to match the fact that in Episode 2 he became CGI. In Episode 3 he was CGI. So if you watch the prequels, it's CGI Yoda. If you watch the original trilogy, it's still puppet Yoda with that. And I much rather would have tried to keep him a puppet, but that's fine.
I mean, I get why they changed it. I mean, and that's one of the things with George Lucas. Like that's one of the things with him all throughout all the Star Wars. He wanted to break ground, to set like new, like even with the original trilogy. I mean, doing things nobody had done before. And when the prequels came out, it was all about computers. Like computers were the thing. Doing computer graphics was the new and up-and-coming thing. And that's why, like, as much as we all hate when he went back and added all that computer technology to the original trilogy, but he wanted to break ground, to do that. He was so focused on that. Like, it makes... I mean, it makes sense that he would decide, no more Puppet Yoda. Like, why would we Puppet Yoda when we can do a CGI Yoda?
In this film, some people complain that, this came out the same year as The Matrix, and Matrix got, Best Special Effects at the Oscars. Some people argue maybe this film should have won because of what they did with Jar Jar and the advancements they did with the CGI technology
Nope.
Okay, whatever.
Nope. Matrix deserved it.
I think The Matrix just did a different style and didn't advance anything, but okay. Anything I did hate...
What do you mean Matrix didn't advance? It's a whole other story.
They turned the camera around. Good job.
No, let's move past this. Okay, we're not having this discussion right now.
So the last character I want to talk about... Darth Maul. Ray Parks, of course. Now, he did have several comics and books and stuff that took place before this film, of course, kind of leading up to when he revealed himself to the Jedi. And a lot of people think that, Darth Maul should have stayed throughout the whole trilogy and been the main villain, much like how we had Darth Vader throughout the whole original trilogy as the main villain. I mean, it was a highlight for that character because he looked the coolest, he acted the coolest, he had the double-bladed lightsabers, so people were really impressed with that character. And I think
they certainly underused him in the movie.
But I love the fact that he came back in Clone Wars. Dave Filoni brought him back, and then throughout Rebels, and he has become my favorite Star Wars villain since then.
Me too.
And I don't know, honestly, if he would have stayed in the prequels, if I would have loved him as much as I love him now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think if they would have left him in... Well, if they would have left him in, then they wouldn't have been... I don't think Dave Filoni would have been able to do anything with him. Yeah. Like, they would have... It wouldn't have... Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I'm kind of... Like, looking back now...
I'm glad
that... Especially since I tend to like what Dave Filoni does much more than I like what George Lucas does in a lot of these...
In the later years.
In the later years. So, I mean, I trust Dave Filoni, and anything he can do with the characters I love, I'm all for it. Yeah. And
so also going back with Darth Maul, and we were watching the scene, the battle at the end, of course. Now we know going to Rebels when Obi-Wan and Maul meet up. I'm going to call him Maul because he's not Darth Maul.
Right.
They meet back up, and Maul tries the same move he used on Qui-Gon on Obi-Wan, and that's how Obi-Wan takes him out because he realized that. Okay. So then I'm thinking about, how Obi-Wan jumped over Maul and sliced him in half, okay? And there's another moment, not just the Qui-Gon defense move that he used, but also the higher ground move that he learned too, which serves a purpose many years later when Anakin tries to jump and flip over him to try to get the upper hand. He can't do it because guess what? Obi-Wan knows that move, okay? Took him out with it. So I just realized that second part of it last night or the other night when we watched it. I'm like, oh, everyone always complains about, oh, the higher ground, make a joke out of it. And I'm like, no, it's a strategy, okay? Obi-Wan learned how that works, so he was able to defend against it. And the reason why Obi-Wan rules.
Obi-Wan is pretty awesome.
He is pretty awesome, so yes. All right, but there is episode 1, gone through the characters, and overall, I mean, it was just... There are good parts about it. Again, it starts the saga, it starts to build the world, introduces you some characters that I love. You know, I like Obi-Wan, I like Qui-Gon, I like Padme, I like Anakin, you know, as characters, but the way they started off, and it was clunky for me. You know, the way, because I think, I know people had expectations. You know, it had been 16 years since the last Star Wars movie. People were expecting a lot, and they were let down. I understand that. Going with the prequels now, I think we're willing to forgive more because it's not the last of Star Wars. You know, we had the end of Revenge of the Sith, and people thought that was it for Star Wars. Now they've picked up and continued, and now this is just another piece of the puzzle. You know, it's not, you know, the 1 out of 6. You know, it's going to be 1 out of like 50 by the time Star Wars is done. So, you know, people are willing to forgive a lot more and take a better look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to do always with that it lived up to expectations. I mean, I had no expectations. I mean, I'm somebody who I don't... It's not at the bottom of my list because it didn't live up to my expectations. It's at the bottom of my list because it's the least good of all of the movies. I mean, it has the most periods of time in it that are just screen wasting.
Boring.
I mean, like the pod race. I mean, I get it. It was cool, but it didn't need to be that long.
Yeah.
I mean, like by halfway through, I was like, oh, come on already. Like, just be over.
Yeah.
You know, like there's several different parts of that film where I just feel like it goes on. Like, so anyway, I'm just saying, I don't think it just is because it doesn't live up to expectations. I think it just is the weakest of the films.
Because, you know, when I did my own personal edit of this film, I basically took out what I didn't like or what I thought was unnecessary. I took 30 minutes out of the film.
Yeah.
You know, so there goes to show you just, you know, how much waste, I guess, the film had, in my eyes, at least. So, but anyway, that is episode 1 for us, guys. Now, I know we talked about the books. We talked about Master and Apprentice. We talked about a little bit about Queen's Shadow. What other books did we miss? I think it was just those 2 that are
I mean, I think
area.
those are the only 2 that are right around this period.
And that's one of the things I want to talk about, too, is the fact that, you know, you have the whole Clone Wars that takes place between episode 2 and episode 3, and a lot of fill and wear. But we still haven't got a lot between these 10-year periods between episode 1 and episode 2.
Well, and I think that they probably could expand a lot, but it just seems like in terms of the Skywalker, not a lot was happening. But I mean, Anakin...
I disagree with that because this is like the formative years. Like I said, because you have the comic book miniseries, Obi-Wan and Anakin, and it's, you know,
I mean, there could be a lot to do with the 2 of them, sure.
Yeah, it's about, you know, Anakin adjusting to the life of the Jedi, you know, completely, again, like you said, he's a little kid that his world has completely changed. He's got to completely rethink how he, you know, thinks about everything.
And he misses his mom.
And just his adjustment to it all, and also, you know, the power inside of him growing and growing, and his more frustration with it, and just, you know, the changes that are going on within him, I think are more interesting than, say, the changes between episode 2 and episode 3. You know, because he's more mature in that way, and yeah, of course, there's more to explore. But I think, you know, when he goes from like 10 to 20, those are some formative years that I think could be more explored in my eyes. And I also want to see, of course, you know, what's going on with the galaxy, the formation of the Separatists, Dooku, all that stuff, you know, happening in the background as well. How, you know, the Jedi are, you know, what's going on with the Jedi. And like I said, the only thing we've gotten as far as new canon-wise is just that Obi-Wan and Anakin miniseries, and I just want more of it. It's all I want. So, but anyway, guys, time for you to fire back, of course. Let me know what you think about episode 1. Are you doing your own little mini marathon or rewatch like we are, of course? Where are you starting? Because honestly, the only time I ever watch episode 1 is when I decide to watch all the films. Like, I would, if it were up to me, I go with the original trilogy, I'll watch episode 3, and then I'll go straight to the new films. Like, episode 1, episode 2, I only watch those when I'm doing like a marathon. Everything you need is in episode 3 as far as backstory. But we'll get to that when we get to episode 3. But anything else you want to talk about before you close off?
No, I don't think so.
All right, well, that's going to be it for us today, guys. Of course, next week we'll be back with episode 2 and our thoughts on that film. I'll be back hopefully on Thursday or Friday with a regular show because there is some stuff to talk about. But that's going to be it, of course. Again, fire back on dayspringdiscussions@gmail.com, the Facebook group, and Twitter. Go out, live your best life, and until next time, may the Force be with us all.